You're listening to Vancouver Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM. We're here on the unceded traditional territory of the Salish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh Nations. This is Bernadine Fox, here with my co-host for the week, Glen Grigg, bringing you Both Sides Now. Welcome to our show. Today I get to chat with Glen Grigg, who, besides being the co-host here at Both Sides Now, is also the chair of FACTBC, who has been working on our behalf to get the government to regulate counsellors in BC. And then after the break, I have the most interesting conversation with a death doula. Do you know what a death doula does? Well, stay tuned.
Young workers face many challenges today. Unaffordable housing, underpaid and precarious work, and a rapidly changing labor environment. New and young workers are also more likely to be injured on the job. One of the best protections you have as a worker is solidarity. In other words, a strong union. Throughout history, unions have fought for the right to collective bargaining, better wages, benefits and working conditions, protection from abuse by employers, and ending harassment and discrimination at work. For more information on how to join a union, visit bcfed.ca/join.
You're listening to Both Sides Now on Vancouver Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM. I'm Bernadine Fox.
And I'm Glen Grigg.
And Glen is going to give us an update on FACTBC and where it's at and all the work they've been doing to regulate therapists. So Glen, what's happening with FACTBC?
Well, it's an exciting time to be part of the Federation of Associations for Counseling Therapy in BC. For almost a quarter century now, British Columbia's provincial government has not been picking up that responsibility, although I'm pleased to report that the provinces all across Canada, BC is starting to really stand out as an exception. But the other provinces have really picked up that theme, and they're either actively moving forward with central regulation of counseling therapists. So that's the good news nationally, and BC has an opportunity to catch up because our current health minister, Minister Dix, has said it's time to modernize how we regulate all the healthcare professions. So that's great, and FACTBC is in on that. And, it's their story to tell, but FACTBC has been one of the groups closely consulted about setting that up. And what we're looking for is higher levels of accountability, easier public access, and being even more centered on the interest of the public when health care professions are being regulated. So that's an exciting time, and we should see some amendments to the Health Professions Act coming up in the next session of the legislature.
Okay, so for political dummies like me, what does the next session of the legislature mean? Like, what is that time frame?
Well, that next session really goes through April, May, and June. Mm-hmm. We've just heard the speech from the throne, and that's where the government says, here's what we're going to get done. And on that agenda is this modernization. So we're excited to see that. We're a little bit frustrated, or maybe even more than a little bit frustrated, because what we've put in front of the Minister of Health is an important application to say, if you amend the Health Professions Act, then any profession that's not already regulated has to start from square one. That could take years. That's not in the public interest. When we have mounting mental health needs, take a major part of the mental health system, which is counseling therapists, and put them years behind. So the solution that we've been working toward in the public interest is to say, under the Health Professions Act, you can just declare that the regulation of counseling therapy is in the public interest.
And has he done that?
We put that to the minister, and the minister has said, well, no, I'm not going to consider that. We're a little bit mystified as to why.
So dumb question. I'm the dummy in this interview. How can anybody say that psychotherapy is not in the public's interest, regulating that? How is that even a question?
If you were to say, well, counseling and psychotherapy are not in the public interest, you would certainly be contradicting the judgment of every jurisdiction in North America.
Well, isn't that, I'm sorry, I'm going to put you on the spot and you can just not answer the question, but isn't that kind of what he's saying? by saying he's not going to answer that question, if they were not acting on it? Are they not just, isn't the Ministry of Health then saying this is not of interest to government, whether or not psychotherapy is useful or harmful to public?
I don't want to, I want to let the minister speak for himself and the minister's officials speak for themselves because they've thought this through. But my best guess would be that they'd say, well, we have a time frame for doing this and we're going to do things in a sequence and we're going to change the legislation and then we're going to introduce any unregulated professions into regulations entirely under the new system. And
how long has FACTBC been trying to be recognized by the government and become regulated, do what they're there to do, which is regulate counselors? How long? When did it start?
Well, I think the conversation started in the late 1980s, and the first meeting I attended was in 1995. And really, in
31 years.
For the last 6 or 7 years, we've just been hearing, well, yeah, we know you did all that stuff and you got ready. And we're going to do it real soon, but not now. And that's been going on for a long time. So the people who are advocating for this dimension of public interest, there's a little bit of saying, well, of course, what you're saying makes sense to you, but we've heard it so many times before, and the follow-through wasn't there. And so we're saying, no, this is a formal request, is the regulation of counseling therapy in the public interest, or is it not?
If you could say one thing to Adrian Dix face-to-face, what would it be about FACTBC?
I'd say, well, I would break it into two parts. One would be to say, Minister Dix, you're doing a couple of things that we cannot be grateful enough for. One is the modernization process, and the other is the handling of the COVID-19 epidemic. Just great work. Mm-hmm. And then we would go on to say, and part of the opioid crisis and part of the COVID-19 pandemic is an unprecedented rise in the need for mental health care. Mm-hmm. And we're neglecting that. And what we've put in front of you is an opportunity to speed up the availability of safe, effective mental health care in British Columbia. And we'd like you to take a second look at that. This is an opportunity for you to be the hero of the story one more time, and for the public to be the big winners.
And all the time. I mean, we're talking 31 years that you've been trying to do this. What's the harm to the public when this doesn't happen?
There are serious risks of harm associated with counseling and psychotherapy. One is there can be physical risk of harm. Many things show up in a counselor's office that are experienced as being something interpersonal or psychological. I think it's in my relationships or in my head. Mm-hmm. But what well-prepared counselors are trained to be able to spot the need for a medical referral. The absence of that means that people go with untreated conditions that can become dangerous. And there are many physical things that have to be ruled out. When counseling and psychotherapy are not carried out well, the emotional harms can be devastating. Mm-hmm. Because this is one of those relationships where you get to talk in confidence. And the counselor is giving a special quality of attention that says, this is just for you to explore your inner world and how that's going to translate into decisions, behaviors, plans, and ways of being at peace with yourself. That's a very sensitive kind of relationship. This is the stuff for as long as civilization has been around, as far as I know. People have been writing about how much we are at risk there. Who knows how many people have really been cheated out of time and resources by people who just weren't skilled enough to help.
Or harmed, seriously harmed. I've heard of some really kind of wacky therapies out there that, have left people dangling, and others where the harm is so profound, it feels for the people that it happened to that their lives are destroyed.
Yeah,
and so what you're saying then is that the longer it goes that we don't regulate counselors in BC, the longer it goes that public is at risk. And the other side of that regulation is accountability. And so if we can't hold people accountable for what they've done to others, then the risk keeps happening. The harm happens in the room of impunity. There is no way of stopping it.
When we go back in history, we find that the harms done by unregulated practices were just huge in the past, and that the best way to deal with harm is to not let it happen in the first place.
Exactly.
High-quality work is effective, it's efficient, it's safe, and so much of cost is tied up in uncontained liability. So costs go down, outcomes get better, and availability goes up.
Right.
If we knew that we could do something that would make us healthier and save us money, wouldn't we do that? Yeah.
Of course we would. So, well, I hope that if Adrian Dix is listening to our show, that he gets it, that by being the gatekeeper and not providing the availability of us being able to regulate our counselors here in BC, that he's basically allowing harm to happen to the public with impunity.
Yeah. And we want to respond so respectfully to the hard work of the minister and his officials. And at the same time, we want to say that deferring this problem to an unspecified time in the future to be dealt with by a bureaucracy that doesn't yet exist, that's just not good enough in the middle of the pandemic.
It's not good enough.
Just not good enough.
No, it's not. So let's all hope that this matter is able to move forward much more quickly than it has. 31 years is atrocious. I want to just switch just a little bit to the issue of death. And it's kind of a big switch, but our next guest is the Death Doula, and we don't have a lot of time to talk about, but I just wanted to get your take on it as a practicing therapist on what happens for people when people close to them, loved ones, die. What are they going through?
Well, one of the things that a well-prepared counselor or psychotherapist does is they sort of do that rotation in their training about being around grief and bereavement. Grief is a response to loss, and it can be very, very painful. And bereavement is a little more specific. It says, what happens when there's someone, not just that I care about, but with whom I have a very deep attachment, and that person dies. And the psychological process that happens there, it's a long process. Can be very involved. It can be complicated by so many factors, by what specifically that relationship was, what the conditions of the death were, how well supported you are. And so there's I think there are two levels of concern. One is that in different times, in different cultures, there's been a lot of support around the experience of death. And the institutions that used to provide that, like community gatherings and especially communities of faith, are not nearly as pervasive now. So people need support with that kind of death and dying. And in our culture, it doesn't get highlighted, doesn't get seen.
Actually, in white culture, it doesn't get highlighted or seen. I know that in other cultures, in particular the First Nations culture, funerals are often a very public community event, and where death is, I don't want to speak on behalf of First Nations people, but death is, included in life. Whereas in white culture, we kind of hide it. I mean, even if you look at funerals, they're inside, they're in a room, the door is closed, sometimes the casket is closed. It's done in such a way as to minimize how close we get to death itself. And then we're encouraged to, in a couple of days, just to forget it and move on and be strong. We've run out of time, but thank you. Soon our guest will join our conversation and talk a little bit about what death doulas are and why they're becoming more and more important in our society. So thank you, Glenn.
Thank you.
And we'll be right back, folks.
If you ever find yourself stuck in the middle of the sea, I'll sail the world to find you. If you ever find yourself lost in the dark and you can't see, I'll be the light to guide you. Find out what we're made of when we are called to help our friends in need. You can count on me like 1, 2, 3, I'll be there. And I know when I need it, I can count on you like 4, 3, 2, and you'll be there. 'Cause that's what friends are supposed to do, oh yeah. Ooh, ooh, yeah. If you're tossing and you're turning and you just can't fall asleep, I'll sing a song beside you. And if you ever forget how much you really mean to me, every day I will remind you. Oh, find out what we're made of when we are called to help our friends in need. You can count on me like 1, 2, 3, I'll be there. And I know when I need it, I can count on you like 4, 3, 2, and you'll be there. 'Cause that's what friends are supposed to do, oh yeah. Ooh, ooh, yeah, yeah. You'll always have my shoulder when you cry. I'll never let go, never say goodbye. You can count on me like 1, 2, 3, I'll be there. And I know when I need it, I can count on you like 4, 3, 2, and you'll be there. 'Cause that's what friends are supposed to do, oh yeah. Ooh, ooh, you can count on me 'cause I can count on you.
Are you a renter in Vancouver, wondering how you'll be able to pay rent during the pandemic? Are you worried about rent debt or the possibility you might be evicted from your home? The Vancouver Tenants Union has your back. They have been very busy during the COVID-19 crisis, trying to effect legislative change that protects renters all over the city from rent debt, rent increases, and eviction. Find out how you can be involved by visiting their website at vancouvertenantsunion.ca or send them an email at tenantsunion.yvr@gmail.com.
You're listening to Both Sides Now on Vancouver Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM. I'm Bernadine Fox, and right now I'm here with Karen Hendrickson, who is the co-founder of the Death Doula Network of BC. And in her bio, the thing that I really like that she says in her bio is a sentence that says that Karen is a professional coach in life, death, grief, and all the messy in-betweens. Hello, Karen.
Hi, Bernadine.
Thanks for joining us. Some of my friends I know that I just finished taking the Death Doula course out of Douglas College because about 4 of us are about to embark on we have already started actually a project on death as artists, and so it was a part of that project that we all took the Death Doula course. So it was very fascinating. I learned lots of things. Managed to plot out my whole funeral by the end of it, which is probably a good thing. And but I'm going to leave this to you to describe what is a death doula.
So what is a death doula? A death doula essentially is a non-medical, non-legal, or judgmental person who actually supports clients and their people or their defined family whenever there is an illness or terminal diagnosis. Some of the other work we do as well even is in supporting healthy individuals is about helping them to create robust, meaningful, and valuable end-of-life plans. We educate, we advocate, and we empower clients by starting conversations about the end-of-life process and death early, and we help to improve the quality and dignity of their end-of-life journey. So it looks like many things, but that's essentially it. Just like a birth doula supports family and new mom on the journey of preparing for birth, and then afterwards when baby arrives and through that process of transition, we do the exact same thing, just at the other end of life.
Yeah, it's actually like a birth doula for people transitioning on to whatever happens after life.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
But what I see in our culture, well, my culture, I'm white, that there is this tendency to not look at death and to not even give it the faintest of thought, as if somehow, if we think about it, we're going to cause it to happen. How do you find that in terms of, helping people do pre-planning of, if there is such a thing? How many people come to you and say, I want to, I'm perfectly healthy and all of those things, but I want to look at my death and how that's going to go?
Well, there certainly aren't a lot of individuals right now, right? We're just starting to create awareness and movement in that area. The one thing that holds the majority of individuals back is we carry this fear about death for all kinds of reasons, right? We're uncomfortable in conversation. We don't know what that means. And, society has become so comfortable with just believing that when their time comes, our medical systems will look after us.
Right.
And the truth is, no matter how robust or effective a medical system is, there will always be gaps with respect to the holistic support and the needs of the individuals on the journey. And so what we find through advanced care planning workshops and things like this that we share in community, those become the gateway to individuals actually entering into conversation about end-of-life planning. And when we actually encourage individuals to step back and give thought to those death experiences that they have witnessed in one way or another that have not gone well,
right,
then it creates a doorway into having conversation about plans I can make so that it does go well, not only for myself when my time comes, but for my people that I leave behind. And so recognizing that stepping into the conversations is actually an act of love for yourself and your people, and ensuring that everybody is cognizant and aware and supportive of choices and decisions that can be made. This is another thing too, is individuals don't necessarily recognize that we have a lot of choice with respect to our end-of-life journey and our comfort wishes and what that can look like for us. And again, as a result of the significant advancements over the years with medical intervention and medical supports, we sort of handed that over to our medical systems and have come to forget that we do have many options even within the healthcare environment. So some of the work that we do is advanced care planning and directives, helping people to understand the importance of having medical directives, why it's important to have those things documented and have the conversations, ensuring people understand why they need to have a medical representative. That's what we call it here in the province of BC. We help them with advocacy within the healthcare system, with their physicians and the palliative care people, especially in situations where they're receiving care at home. Like, this has become more and more important over this past year with the COVID environment and more people choosing to be at home.
So you mentioned the advanced care planning. What does that entail? I know you mentioned the medical directives and the medical representations, but there's other parts of it that I learned about that are much more personal about what's important to you. So could you explain that a little bit for folks?
Sure. So when we talk about advanced care planning with clients, one of the things that we first off focus on is we dig really deep into the personal values and wishes, right? So who and what matters most to you. And only when we get clear on what that is can we build good advanced care plans. And your advanced care plan has a legal component around your wills and power of attorney. It has a financial component around estate planning. And so, I always advise people, whether you have $5 or $50 million, the reality is you do need to give some thought to estate planning, because there are expenses upon death, and how do you want your people to be left to take care of those things. But even deeper into that is, making choices and decisions about what treatments you may or may not want with respect to prolonging of life. And do those align for you? And knowing that whatever choices you make, it's the right choice because it's your choice. Right. And so what I choose for me does not have to align at all with what you choose. It just has to be right for me. Right?
So for folks that, sorry, I'm interrupting you, but I just want to make something clear. So for folks who really don't have any medical knowledge or haven't been involved in the medical institutions that we have at this point and don't necessarily understand the impact of some treatments as opposed to others, how do you determine sort of when somebody, say, isn't ill, what they do or don't want in the future?
So sometimes to make things a little more simplistic and sort of navigating that process, we'll go through a process of getting individuals to identify what things really bring them joy in their life right now today. And so what are those things, right? And then documenting what those things are, and then giving some thought to which of those things can they live without and which can they not live without. So that's more about how they define their quality of life versus which treatment they may or may not choose to take. So as an example, there's a story of a grandfather who is requiring some medical care, and, sits down with his family, and family says, so, tell us, right? Dad, grandpa, right? What do you really want? What's most important to you? What do you still want to be able to do if you have treatment? And grandpa says, the most important thing for me at this point is being able to watch football on TV and eat ice cream and read stories with my grandson.
That's wonderful. Yes, absolutely. I get all of those things, although I don't watch sports, but
pretty simplistic, right? And so then the healthcare team says, Mr. Smith, we recommend we do this surgery for you. And then the question is, once you do the surgery, is our grandfather still going to be able to watch football and read and eat ice cream with his grandson? If the answer to that is yes, then the surgery is appropriate. If the answer to that is no, then some other things need to be considered. So it can be as simplistic as that versus I should have blood transfusion, shouldn't have blood transfusion, should have chemo, shouldn't have chemo, whatever those other options are with respect to treatment. It's more about what I enjoy and the quality of life I still really want.
But it also helps the people that you've put in as your medical representation. Is that the right word?
Yeah, medical representative,
Oh, okay. It also gives them guidelines and helps them to be able to do the job that they've agreed to do, which is to help you. And so they don't have to impose their own ideas of what they think is right or wrong or good or bad. They can, in fact, have very clear directives on how to help you. So your advanced care planning actually is a gift to the people around you, but it also is a gift to yourself in the future.
Absolutely, right? Yeah. So, when you start to work on the advanced care plan, hopefully an element of that is also what we call the courageous conversations with your people. So helping them to understand what is important to you, but not only just what, but why it is important. Because when we understand why it is important, it's easier for us to support. And so there is a whole support system that you really want to go smoothly and behind you as best as possible. And that is definitely for your medical representative. You want them to be very clear about what you do and don't want and what matters to you. But you also want your other people to understand as well so that they can support your representative in taking action for you if needed.
Right.
So that the support system is bigger and everybody collectively honors you and cares for you enough to make sure that what you wish for is what happens as best as possible.
Wow. I really am kind of blown away. I didn't know what to expect when I went into the course, and I'm still kind of blown away listening to you talk, but we have to take a break right here, so we'll be right back. Folks, don't go away. We have lots more to talk about.
Did you know that Vancouver Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM, has over 90 different shows produced by over 350 community members? This wide range of programming produced by our diverse group of programmers ensures that we have a show you'll love. We have shows on feminism, spirituality, disability rights, politics, unions, and parenting. We play jazz, indie rock, reggae, blues, and folk. We broadcast in 12 different languages and have more First Nations programs than any other radio station in Vancouver. Find your show on Vancouver Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM. All different, all the time.
You're listening to Both Sides Now on Vancouver Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM. I'm Bernadine Fox, and I'm talking with Karen Hendrickson, who is a death doula, about what does it mean to have a death doula, and what do they do, and how do they help? Karen, we were talking a little bit about planning funerals and advanced care planning, but I know you wanted to talk a little bit about comfort, providing comfort and wishes, and doing the active support. I think that's what you called active support for folks. So what does that look like?
Yeah. So that's what I call it, active support, is when you're actively supporting someone who is in final stages of life, whatever that is, couple months, weeks, whatever the case may be, and their people. Typically it is their caregiver and some of their defined family. And, this is, to me, the most powerful element of the work that we do one-on-one. It creates opportunity through conversation and support for all of the individuals involved in the process to express all of the emotion that they're carrying in ways that are safe and not going to be judged and not seen to be hurtful to each other. So oftentimes what can happen is, that the individual with the illness may say to me, I don't really want my kids to know that I'm dying, but I know I'm dying, Karen. But let's not talk to the kids about it, even if they're adult children. I'll be told this, right? And then the children will say, Karen, we know Mom's dying, but let's not tell her.
Yeah, that's
a
bit
odd. It seems odd, right? But it happens. And so, part of our role is to be able to bring everybody together into that space where we can all say, we all know what's going on here. And so what do we need to do together to make this the best that it can possibly be in this period of time? And so often, one-on-one with the client or the patient, if you want to call them that, right? What can happen is a lot of conversation around, the last things they want to be said, or letters they want to be written, or forgiveness they need to ask for, and so we work with them to find a way that's comfortable for them to get to that place. So, last year I supported a young fellow. He was 30. I predominantly supported him and his mom, who was his primary caregiver. And when I first met them, there was a lot of heart pain, not just around the circumstances and the situation, but, along, some challenges within family over the years. And when I met this fellow in May, there was a lot of heart pain and a lot of unresolved with respect to things that had occurred in his life. And over the course of a number of months, we had conversation. I wrote some letters on his, letter on his behalf for his mom, and did some things that would help him so that when his time came, months later in December, his heart was okay. He was good, right?
Yeah, that kind of ties into something that I heard once upon a time, that people, I think it was from a nurse actually in a hospital, palliative care, and she said that the worst thing for people when they die is not, they don't regret the things they did. They regret the things they didn't do. And that's not necessarily jumping out of a plane, but it's probably more like what you're talking about not having that conversation, not apologizing, not making amends, not telling somebody that they love you, or that you love them.
Yeah, or even just not finding your own resolve within, a strange relationship, right? So sometimes we can't repair the actual relationship, but we can we can do things that bring us to have a peaceful resolve around that relationship, right? And so, in this work, it's quite powerful from the perspective of what happens then within those that circle as people are shifting through these relationships and finding the peace with each other, right? And coming to recognize the richness. So I say always, some people look at me like, Karen, you're crazy. Right. There is such deep richness in the end of life journey. If we could just put our fear aside, talk about what we feel in a way that is safe, right? And simply support and honor each other in the process, but in particular the individual that's dying at the time. It's their journey. And so how do we find ways as caregivers and family to support them in how they choose to take that journey? And, you know, how do we make whatever is remaining in time, maybe it's not always joyous, but it's rich with the stuff that really matters, which is the love of our people and the love for our people, right? And what we leave behind. So, you know, there's lots of ways to do that. Along the way as well, there's a lot of, you know, there's daily grief, there's anticipatory loss, there's more loss happening each day with deterioration of health, right, and getting closer to the end. And so how do you support people in that, right? I mean, caregivers have so much deep emotion, and they suffer from exhaustion and all of these kinds of things. And sometimes all you need to do is to have an opportunity to sit with a neutral party and say, I am so angry. This makes me so frickin' mad, right? I'm tired of, you know, watching the clock and listening to alarms for medication and body turning, you know, rolling over in bed and all of these things that caregivers have to, I'm sick of it, right? I don't want to do it anymore. And that's an emotion of the moment, right? They aren't comfortable in having those conversations with their person that they're supporting, but they still are feeling those emotions and they're real, and they need room to let that go. Right?
So a lot of people think of, when you say death doulas, they kind of look at that as something that's morbid, or, you know, somebody who deals with death all the time as kind of creepy and weird and dark. But that certainly wasn't what I got from the course that I went to. It really, it opened my eyes to the fact that dealing with death is not a morbid thing, and it's not a creepy thing. It's actually something that's much more magical. Is that that's kind of what you're talking about? Is that, yes?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Every individual I've had the opportunity to support has been an honor for me. Absolutely. Because it is, it's a beautiful component of life. It's not an end. It's, you know, it's the end of physical life, but, you know, death is a part of life, and it can teach us so much with respect to how we're choosing to live, right? You know, another element through this journey that happens, especially if, you know, when you're in those final months, is you're relying a lot on your healthcare team. And if your healthcare team is supporting on a palliative or hospice basis in the home, there are all kinds of challenges that come with that as well too, right? So, you know, and caregivers and individuals sometimes can't feel heard, sometimes because lack of resources in the system aren't necessarily receiving the care that they have a right to. And so what do you do then? You're exhausted, right? Your caregivers and your people are exhausted. So how do you hold you know, your healthcare team to account to provide the things that you have a right to and that they actually commit to provide but can't? So where do you get the support in helping to navigate that? And so as death doulas, you know, that's part of the work that I do is advocacy. And so I work with respect to helping get the communication happening between the healthcare providers, whether that's the home care nurses or the healthcare team leads and the families, so that the communication will happen, and so that family feels they have the capacity of energy, right, and right to be able to say, you know, this isn't working for us, and this is not what was committed to us, and something needs to change, right? So certainly in the home health area, you know, in some cases, you know, resources and home care nurses, there's limited resources. And so if you're receiving home care over the period of, let's say, 6 months as an example, right, you could have as many as 20 to 25 different individuals coming in for your care.
Wow.
That creates inconsistency. It creates lost communication. It creates errors and mistakes, you know.
So Death Doula can come in and organize all of that and make sure that the communication is working and know to ask. I know lots of people who are afraid to say to their doctor, you gave me this medication and it's not working. I mean, they just pretend to take it and, do you know what I mean? So lots of people don't want to have a discussion with doctors where they're not saying you're a wonderful person kind of thing. So doulas can do that. They can come in and then you sort of be the brain that is the outside brain that's not involved in this big thing that's going on necessarily in the same way other people are, and be able to organize and make sure the communication is happening.
Yeah, so we help to facilitate and sometimes mediate those conversations, right? Certainly with healthcare providers, and even sometimes within families, right, or within your people, right? So sometimes, everybody that's on this journey with the individual who's facing end of life, they're all in a different place. They're all in the exact same place, yes, but they're all emotionally in a different place. And so sometimes there's friction and frustration and misunderstanding. And so, we can help with that as well, too, bringing people together and helping to facilitate conversation so that people are heard. And
but Death Doula is not a therapist, right? I mean, that was really clear. No. So what happens when you come up, listening, we all listen to each other as much as we can and do, and some of us are better and some of us are not. But that's an act of being a friend or just a supportive, caring person. What happens when you come up and butt up against an issue where it's more than what you can do by just listening?
So I know for me in my work, right, so in my background, in my prior corporate career, I was a labor relations negotiator and, dealt with collective bargaining and mediation and grievance handling. And so I have some training with respect to conflict resolution in those matters, right? So you do certainly have to have some awareness around that, and you have to be able to allow people's space to be heard or to say their piece. But then, if things are escalating, you also have to recognize as a doula where your strengths are and what you are and aren't capable of, right? And so, in my experience, I haven't had a situation where things have gone completely sideways. I have had to say, I think everybody's getting a little bit wound up here. So let's just step away right now and give everybody an opportunity to think about what we talked about today. And then typically as a doula, you're not necessarily just supporting the individual or caregiver. You actually are creating a bit of a relationship with some of the other players. And my experience has been, there will be loop back to me, right? And so you just help them navigate individually and together. So are you going to be successful all the time?
No.
The truth is, no, you're not, right? Is it always going to go magically? No, probably not, because we're human beings, right?
What do you do when you're dealing with, I presume that your primary client is the person that is dying. Am I right? Or is that an assumption I'm making?
I have the majority of time when I've been approached to be of service, it's been from a family member who's approached me first. Yeah.
So you become, the family member becomes your client then, or do you become a client to the entire support network? Or not you become a doula to the entire support network?
Depending on what the need is and what the agreed contract is. So I don't provide service without contract, but typically it's a family member who approaches me first, and there's some conversation, and then I will always say, I'm not in a position, I can support you individually, but I'm not in a position to support your person who's facing end of life until we have a conversation and they also, are looking for support from you directly. And then you determine who's going to be a part of that process. Right. And that gets built into my contract of service.
We also live in a country now that does have MAID, which is medically assisted. I always forget what the I is. Medically assisted. What's
medical assistance in dying.
In dying. That's why I forget it. Yeah, so people who are facing a terminal illness can apply to have a medically assisted death. Can you explain a little bit about what that is?
Sure. So a medical assistance in dying is whereby you making a choice not to allow the natural course to prolong your life, and so you're looking for assistance in death, which comes by injection. There's a process, right? So you go through an application process that is reviewed through the healthcare authorities with respect to whether you are of sound mind to make the decisions and whether you meet the established criteria. There's been new criteria that has just been brought into our legislation just within the last month or so now, I guess.
I'm sorry, could you say that again? There's new criteria that what?
There's change in legislation, right? So, the Bill 2.7 changes have just occurred within the last couple of months now, I think, which at one time you were not able to make a future request, and now you can.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's good.
But
at some point you can lose your ability to vocalize or state what you need. If it's a future request, then it's already in writing. So, okay, so that makes sense.
That's part of the changes that are coming through that, yeah. So, the individual completes paperwork, it gets approved, and then the individual picks a date and then makes whatever plans, or their people make whatever plans around that. So, I'm not sure. I think there's a requirement for 2 individuals, so to come and administer the medication. I had a friend who actually chose to die by maid a couple of years ago now, and my other good friend was actually present through the process. But in preparation for that, they prepared sort of like a living ceremony. On the date that it occurred, there was a gathering of a number of very special individuals for this person. They all gathered together. They sang. They shared stories. They had a drummer there. The physician and the second nurse showed up to administer. It was a beautiful, beautiful experience, and it can be, right? There are other complications sometimes that can go along with this, and that, not everybody completely understands why someone would make this choice. And so, again, conversation can be really important in supporting that. Yeah. Certainly in some communities, it's not something that they even want people to know that has been their choice, right? And so... but a doula can play a significant role in this process as well, too, in helping an individual and their family prepare. So if this is the decision that's been made, then how can they prepare to make that, again, as rich as possible, right?
So I would imagine that all of that communication also helps if you are being asked to provide doula care. Is that what you call it, doula care? To perhaps somebody who is from a different culture and has different traditional burial rituals that they do. Are you able to navigate that, or is there any part of that that becomes a problem for what you're doing as a doula?
I think it really, if you're stepping into this work authentically, you really have to be open to supporting as best you can legally, right? The wishes of another individual. And if for whatever reason you don't feel you are able to do that, it doesn't align to you, as an example, then you have a responsibility, I believe, to try and find another resource to support them, right? But, I think there's a number of things. Number one, right, never make an assumption about an individual and what's important to them, even, despite their faith. Yeah. Or
clothing,
personal beliefs, any of that, right? You make no assumptions about anything. You check and validate everything, right? And then you help them in ways to support whatever those beliefs are as best you can, right, from a legal perspective.
So in all of that,
answer your question?
Yeah, it did actually. Okay. So it actually answered it perfectly. It's a perfect answer as far as I'm concerned. Not that I'm an expert on any of this, but I do feel that what you just said is true about anybody I meet or any relationship I have, or the relationships we do have, is that if we're respecting each other, that is what we do. That's what you described.
One other piece maybe we might want to talk about is around, funeral planning or living celebrations. So, this is another area where death doulas can often support as well, right? So can help in sort of getting clarity on what the individual and their family would like to see with respect to celebration.
Right.
Certainly.
So it's not just before death then. What you're talking about is that you're helping, you're walking with this person through the process of dying and their family through the process of their death, and you are there before and after. I guess that's what you meant by you're there between life, death, and grief and all the messy in between. So so you would be planning their funerals. Do you help out in the funerals, or are you... I've heard of one thing that's called a home funeral that I never knew existed before.
Yeah, so I personally do not actively help with actual funeral sort of death care, but there are some individuals that do. At the same time, I do help individual and family know about what their options really are. So if you haven't had the conversations or you haven't given thought to these things prior to the death, inevitably, we've all heard the stories, right? People are wrought with emotion, sitting in a funeral home, right? Not clear on what their real options are. Right. And then, 6 months, a year later saying, gosh, I don't even know why we did that with that. Right. My role is to help people to know what options are available to them, right? With respect to green burial or, liners or caskets or shrouds or home funeral, whatever the case may be, right? So
there's all different kinds of funerals that you can have.
Right, or even to what role you can play, certainly in home death, what role you can play with respect to some of the preparation of body, right, before it goes to funeral home, if that's your intention. So things that you can do in washing and preparing the body, all that kind of stuff, right?
Right.
But they do it separately in a separate, it's not part of their paid contract to do that if they're supporting home funeral. They're doing it at different capacity. Right. But there are, individuals that may opt for that, right?
So instead of being in a society which traditionally, culturally, in some ways, in terms of white culture, it certainly is my experience, where we just don't talk about death and we don't plan it because then that might make it happen, and we don't talk with each other about it, and we just ignore it, hoping to avoid it, which nobody is going to avoid. What a death doula really does is bring it front and center and engage in conversation and plan for something that is inevitably going to happen and is inevitably going to cause us enormous emotion, and help us have a plan to move through that so that we can focus on our emotions and not on details about which coffin and which plot or cremation or this or that. I mean, you are allowed to be in the moment. Am I right? Am I getting that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Right.
Cool.
And I think the great thing, for me, as a coach, so even in my coaching practice, if somebody's approached me for coaching support and isn't even, talking about death or advanced care plannings or what have you, one of the first things I will ask them is, I want you to sit down and envision you're sitting on your deathbed.
Right.
Right? What are you wishing for? How are you feeling? If it's tomorrow, how are you feeling about the life you're living today?
Right.
Because that is our wake-up lesson with respect to the things we're choosing in our living, right? Yeah. And so if we can get more comfortable with the conversations beforehand, if we can accept the fact that, guess what? Every single one of us is going to die, and every single one of us is going to experience people we love dying.
Right.
So let's just clean up all the messiness as best we can with each other now while we're alive, so that we can just enjoy the richness of our relationships together if we have that opportunity.
And one of the things that I read on your website is a quote from Buddha that said, the trouble is you think you have time. And that is so true. We need to realize that we don't. And of course, COVID has brought our mortality front and center to us on our TV every day, when it's rising numbers and scary stories and young people dying, So it's a good topic to have, and maybe it's a good time to have that conversation. Thank you so much, Karen, for coming and chatting with me about this. It's an important topic, and I'm going to leave on our website information about how folks can get a hold of you with a link to your website and to the the Death Doula Network of BC if they want more information as well. So thank you. Important
Thank you so much, Bernadine.
You're welcome. And we'll be right back.
If I have a son, I'll teach him to be brave. 'Cause if I have a son, he's never really safe. And when you run to the corner store for a snack, I wanna know that you'll make it back home. Oh, your skin, it glitters like gold. There's love inside of your soul. But no matter what you say, no matter what you do, this world will never be as friendly to you. I wanna keep you close, I wanna keep you safe. I hope I see the day where I don't have to pray every time you go. And every time you go, if I have a girl, I'll teach her to be strong. 'Cause even when you're right, they'll tell you that you're wrong. And if you want something, you'll work twice as hard. 'Cause that's the only way we get far, far. Your skin, it glitters like gold. There's love inside of your soul. But no matter what you say, no matter what you do, this world will never be as friendly to you. I wanna keep you close, I wanna keep you safe. I hope I see the day where I don't have to pray every time you go. Every time you go. I saw a man lose his life, all 'cause his skin looked like mine. I hope the world makes a change, so when you get here it's not the same. Your skin, it glitters like gold. There's love inside your soul. But no matter what you say, no matter what you do, this world will never be as friendly to you. I wanna keep you close, I wanna keep you safe. I hope I see the day where I don't have to pray every time you go. Ooh, every time you go. If I have a son, I'll teach him to be brave. 'Cause if I have a son, he's never really safe.
You're listening to Both Sides Now on Vancouver Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM. I'm Bernadine Fox, and that's our show. My thanks goes out to Glen Grigg for giving us an update on FACTBC, and to Karen Hendrickson from the Death Doula Network for chatting with us about that all-important topic of death. And a show like this is never good enough without music, so my thanks to Bruno Mars, Ruth B., and to Sherry Ulrich, who, as always, each week sings us in and out of our programming. But most importantly, my thanks goes out to you for joining us today. Stay safe out there. If you have questions or feedback about this program or want to share your story or have something to say to us, we want to hear from you. You can reach us by email, bothsidesnow@coopradio.org, or via Twitter @BothSidesNowBC. This is Bernadine Fox. We'll be back next week. Until then.